Okay, what's up, everybody? This is Gavin. We're going to go ahead and do the X based on the Satoshi Showdown, the Craig Wright Contempt case unpacked with the speakers panel here on X and recorded on for YouTube and get it out there to everybody. So we got some special guests, including Riley Cyrus, Miss Casey Nicole's up on stage with us. Riley's in the courtroom there today, and so he's going to kind of give us an actual report as to what happened. And then we've got our man, none other than 1369 BSV, who did the court reporting on the Copa trial that basically I did a lot of recaps on. So what's up, everybody? Miss Casey Nicole, how you doing?
Doing great. Good to see
Awesome.
everyone.
Good to see everyone. Yeah. And Scott, what's up, dude? 1369 BSV.
I'm good, thank you. Good to hear
Nice.
from you again. Sorry for waking
Good.
you up early.
Yeah, it's not. and maybe you could invite Crypto Spartacus up too, Casey. I know he's been following this closely, so that'd be awesome. And let's see. So Riley, we had you yesterday, man. How you doing? Good morning.
Morning, Gavin. Morning, guys. How's it going?
Hey, awesome, doing good. So let's why don't you just give us I'm a little bit late on the news, so I know you guys are way ahead of me on time zones. So just take me back from the start. We all I really know is there was going to be a potential hearing today, and then I got messages from Scott. So what's the latest and greatest, my man? Tell us. We're in the Copa v. Wright case.
So basically the gist of it was, I think it was Square Up Europe basically trying to fight the passing off case by saying Craig's in contempt of court. So that's basically what that hearing was about today.
All right. So they one of the Copa members, was it one of the Copa members?
Square Up Europe, I believe.
I believe Square Up were the second people that were put on the passing off case. It was the BTC devs and I believe Square Up as well.
So do you know which case this was for?
So basically, he's trying to sue them for 911 billion.
Okay, the passing off case. That's the one we're in.
Yeah. So they're trying to fight it by saying he's in contempt of court due to the identity trial.
So what was Judge Miller? Is Judge Miller going to be the same judge for Craig's new case?
Well, he was there today and they were arranging future dates. I believe there's a date either the 26th or 27th of November for directions, and then 18th and 19th of December for the contempt.
Okay, so I guess I'm confused. So basically we got Scott, do you know which case this was? Was this Copa or was this Craig's new case?
This is Craig's new case. This is the passing off case. There's the BTC devs and then there's Square Up. And obviously Square Up are saying, well, this case is in contempt of the original case. They're trying to say that due to the injunctive order, which states that Craig can no longer say he is Satoshi Nakamoto. It's that. So the three parts of it are exactly. I've got the screenshot here. 2 seconds. The three parts of it are threatening to bring precluded proceedings as defined in the order in breach of the injunction set out under paragraph 2 of the order. Bringing precluded proceedings as defined in the order in breach of the injunction set out under paragraph 1A and 1B of the order, and C, failing to display the online notice as defined in the order in relation to his Twitter account at Dr._CS Wright for the full period ordered, i.e. until 23rd of October 2024, in breach of the positive injunction to do so under paragraph 5A of the order. So I'm guessing these are the three things they're saying it's in contempt of. Paragraph 2, I'm not sure on the exact paragraph, but I believe it's obviously not to claim he's Satoshi and also not to claim any ownership over BTC or Bitcoin code base or copyright or patent, whatever it was. So they're saying he's in conflict of that, in contempt of that.
So when you look at the heading of the case title, does it look familiar to you, like the old case, or does it look all new, like this other case?
Well, I found those documents which were shared. I've not been able to find the full case file to look into it.
Okay.
I'm guessing where that document has been shared from is the QR code that Bird and Bird provided at the event. That usually is where Bird and Bird provided the documents on their side, because they were one of the major releases during the trial. So I would presume, without being 100% sure, that's where that's came from. But you can check. I believe Riley shared a picture of that, and if you zoom in, you can get the code up. I've just been very busy.
Okay, cool. So Riley, take me back in. So what happened when you got there, and you're doing the reporting? So just take us from the beginning. What time of day was it, and who was there, and what all,
So
go ahead and be.
I got there. I got there about 10:20. Found the courtroom. Walked in. There was like 6 Bird and Bird lawyers there. Nobody on the other side. The usher asked me what I was doing there. I just said, just observing. She's like, no problem.
Okay, so you're on the left side, and then Copa was on the right side. Well, I'm sorry.
It's until.
Go,
Sorry?
Oh, I think you cut out for a moment, and go ahead, and I may have interrupted you, and I apologize, but you were cutting out. So you were on the left side of the courtroom, and then the
Yeah, I was in the only spot in the courtroom where the camera couldn't see you, which was good.
What camera?
Well, there was a camera there. I'm assuming it was for the stream, because Craig was dialing in remotely, so we could see Craig, and Craig could see Justice Mellor. And when it panned out, you could see Bird and Bird and their associates, but you couldn't see me because I was right in the corner.
Oh, okay.
Was that video streamed for just the people within the case, like for Craig, or was that also for outside people to be able to watch a live link similar to the previous case?
I'm not sure, but when I've got in there, there was 6 people logged in on the screen, and then just before the case started, or the hearing started, there was 9. So I would assume there was like another 8 people who dialed in. But
Those
guessing.
people you see on the screen will be people that are a part of the case. So that will likely be BTC Dev representatives, and that will likely be Square Up representatives that were also on the streams. Usually, the people that actually attend the court are the lawyers.
Were there
Right,
any
okay.
were there any press or any of the just regular people in the courtroom?
Yeah, I was sat next to a guy. He seemed like he didn't want to talk to me at all. I don't know if he was like, he probably weighed 120 pounds. And he didn't want to talk to me. I was trying to be friendly with him, I said, what's your name? And he's like muttered something. I couldn't even hear him. And I said, who are you here for? Who are you supporting? And he's like, nobody. I was like, all right, okay. I said, who are you working for? And he said, everyone. I was like, Jesus Christ, this guy's fucking hard work. And I said, oh, do you buy cryptocurrency? And he just laughed and went, no. I was like, all right, okay, mate. And he was on his laptop and typing away. I don't know who he was. I don't really care.
So did they let you use your phone and take pictures and do everything, and I guess a computer in the courtroom?
Right. So when I went in, I said to the usher, I said, can I tweet live? And she said, yes. She said, just don't record anything. So I was like, cool. For some reason, I thought, right, I'm just going to take a few pictures before court was in session, which I did, so I could like attach them to the thread. Anyway, like probably an hour into the court proceedings, the KC Huff was giving his monologue. He'd finished his monologue, and one of his lackeys had passed him a post-it note, and he said, excuse me, your lord, apparently somebody is tweeting pictures of the hearing. And then Justice Miller's popped his head straight around the screen, looked straight at me, and I just went, no. And then he said, I suggest if anybody is doing that, you need to stop. And I just said to him, I said, I have not took any photos while the court's been in session. And then he just said, okay.
Oh man, he called you out.
I know.
That's more recognition than Scott had, I think. Or Scott, did Justice Miller talk to you in court? I don't know.
No, not me. He did Dolores for shaking her head, but not me. And I definitely didn't take pictures in there.
Okay, so just tell me inside the transcript, whatever you wrote down. They asked for the hearing. Justice Miller called the hearing, right? So, and Craig was he represented by counsel?
Craig was representing himself, and he was in Singapore.
He was in Singapore.
Yeah, Justice Miller was talking about Craig's skeleton arguments, saying they're very illuminating. Then basically it was basically the King's Counsel was just speaking an awful lot, and it was quite difficult to follow. This is the first time I've ever been in court. But he was like the Judge Miller was making some observations. He's saying, I can see why the contempt application has been made. However, in the view of the content of the skeleton claim from Craig Wright, he might be able to amend it. So basically, if they do find him in contempt, the way he's worded it, he can change it, and then he won't be in contempt. And Craig even said this himself. He said, it's never been my intention to be in contempt of court. So he's basically covered.
Oh, so the court, so Miller's saying that he's allowed, that he's likely, even if he finds him in contempt, which will be in what, December 17th or 18th? Is that the hearing?
I would assume so. But he did say, like Craig said, he's going to provide more evidence, and Miller said, I look forward to seeing further evidence. So if he gives enough evidence, then Miller might be able to say, right, well, you're not in contempt without the hearing.
What was the... Go ahead, Scott.
That could also be regarding the third point of that, with saying that the Dr. C.S. Wright account took the notice off. Craig has made that public that he's not in control of that account. And so if there was any issue there, then that would be with regards to the person who did that. But I would imagine that the person who did that would also be under authority from solicitors and from people, that it's not something that you just, mess up, make an error. It's something that you know exactly the date is supposed to come off. So that could also be extra evidence with regards to that. Okay,
so if I go to your profile, you have a thread here that you made about this. Copa v. Wright, 11:15, right? And then you said that's all for today. There's about a bunch of tweets. So
yeah.
Okay, it says Craig is now saying that if he's in contempt of court, that was never his intention, that he'll change his claim.
Yeah.
Okay, so counsel wants Craig to come in person for the contempt hearing. Craig has put a claim against more than 120 companies, so counsel states that he must come in person. What did the court say about that?
That is still up in the air. Miller wanted him to. He's saying, I think you should come. And Craig's saying, well, I'm going to be away from my family for Christmas. And then Miller's saying there's flights every day to Singapore. And then Craig said, well, I'll be jet lagged. And then he said, well, just come a few days earlier then. But they didn't rule on that yet.
Oh, he wants him there.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. I think the King's Counsel said something along the lines, if you can sue this many people for that much money, then you should be here in person and not basically hid behind your keyboard in Thailand.
Singapore.
Yeah, but I know. Well, that's the funny thing. The King's Counsel told us that he was in Singapore, dialing in from Singapore, and then he just kept referring to Thailand.
Craig did, or the King's Counsel?
King's Counsel.
Who's the King's Counsel, Scott? What is that?
Jonathan Huff. It's like
Hoff.
well, yeah. Is it? I think it's the highest degree of lawyer or barrister that you can get in the UK.
Yeah, it's the KC. So obviously, when they put the title after it, it's Jonathan Hoff KC, the King's Counsel. I
All
believe
right.
that's
So they got
yeah.
Hoff up there again. He's back. He's the same guy that they had before for Copa.
Yeah.
He's good, man. He's a good counsel. He's pretty well.
It was also Moss, the Irish guy, and I believe there was Tristan as well, and there was another gentleman from what I saw from the picture.
So what
And
about so did Craig abandon his attorneys, his law firm?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like he's representing himself.
Did that come up at all? Did the court say,
Yeah.
"Hey, Craig, do you know what you're doing?" Or did they try to test him at all on that?
Well, yeah, it was mentioned, and then basically King's Counsel said something along the lines of, "I don't want Craig to give evidence whilst he's defending himself. Basically, if the evidence hasn't been submitted, you can't use it, and then they'd have to disregard that evidence." He said, because that can happen when you are representing yourself. It sounded like he was trying to put obstacles in the way constantly.
Well, they were constantly talking about, I don't want Craig to breach privilege last time. Is that what he was talking about again? Privilege?
No, I don't think it was privilege. I think it's. I'm sorry, but I'm really not up to all this law stuff. So basically, the KC was saying that if Craig's representing himself and he subconsciously says something that hasn't been brought into evidence, then it would have to be disregarded.
Yeah, anything that's not been filed has to be inadmissible.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, if Craig starts testifying about the case and that hasn't come up yet, basically, they would object.
Yeah, anything that's unrelated or is not been admitted, then they say that they would reject it.
Okay.
Apart from the evidence to the contrary of their claim.
So they got old Jonathan Hoff back for this case, this new case. They hired him again. Same
Looks
guy.
that way. Looks that way.
Was Craig nervous? Did he look upset?
No, Craig was. He looked very, very smart. He had a nice electric blue shirt on and a bright red tie, and he looked very confident and relaxed, I thought.
Oh.
And he produced a couple of nice one-liners too. But he did get shouted at by Justice Mellor.
Oh, he shouted at him. What happened?
Well, I thought Craig was very polite and probably overly polite. If he spoke over someone, obviously it's video link and there's probably a delay. He was just, I'm sorry, my lord. And then Justice Mellor was saying something, and then Craig started speaking, and Justice Mellor lost his rag and said, excuse me. I was like, oh, calm down.
Wow. I see.
Yeah.
So that's when they probably wanted him to come in person because there's a lag on that feed.
Yeah, no doubt it would be better in person, I guess. But if you don't need to do it, and like somebody said earlier, well, we had COVID for the last 3 years, so everything was done remotely, so why not?
I think if everybody who was on that screen also came in, then that would be inappropriate. But if one person has to be singled out when everybody is involved, I think that's not appropriate.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah. As long as it's equal for all parties, that all the councils got to be there too. All those BTC Core people. Oh, so what about BTC Core? Were they there?
No.
Huh.
They may have been represented via the live link. They will have been represented by some people via the live link.
Did the court say that? Did the court say, "Oh, BTC Core, are you here?" Did they say something about their counsel?
I tried to have a look there on my. I took a picture of the screen, but I can't even make out what the names are on there. So there's 6 names up there. One of them's Craig. I don't know.
Well,
the
do you
other 5 are.
remember the court saying anything about the word BTC core?
Mm, mm, no, sorry, I can't. I definitely remember them saying something about Square Up Europe.
Huh. I wonder if that's maybe that maybe
I'm
it's just,
gonna come away from the mic a second just so I can have a little look at that QR code that Bird and Bird shared.
yeah, it's possible that they're just like Craig, BTC core. Maybe it's just like a DBA for, I guess like an AKA for everybody. And then you got Square Up Europe is how they're going to come in. I'm just trying to figure out who's representing BTC core. Is that Hoff?
I just posted something on my feed, and that was the list of 122 people who Craig is suing. But I don't know how to post it on the Nest if somebody wants to put it on the Nest.
Oh, the list of these defendants?
Yeah.
You want to grab that, Casey?
Yes, I'll grab.
Everybody, please share this, retweet the space, get it out there. We got to get the freaking message out there. We had 20, almost 3,000 people listen to this space yesterday. So people are interested in this, clearly. So and that was just totally random. That was just more of a Halloween prank space.
Casey, I'm going to send you the link, the Dropbox link as well, because this is all the case files.
Okay, I'll throw it up there as soon as I get it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, there's Jack. He was asking me about the case too, and maybe we could add him up here as well, Casey, and see what he's been following this case and see what he has to say about it. Because I'm not actually certain to what's going on, to be honest, but it sounds like it's the new case, but we're not sure yet. We're not 100%. The thing that doesn't make sense to me is what jurisdiction would Miller have in the new case? Because I thought it was going to be a different judge in the new case, but I don't know.
This is kind of both.
Okay, Crypto Spartacus, please, yeah. You think it's both?
I mean, really, what they're trying to say is that he wasn't allowed to bring forth the passing off claim because somewhere in like the ruling from the last case, he was ordered not to bring forth any new cases under the premise that he's Satoshi or in good faith that he's like acting. I think it's the specific wording that's used. I'd have to reference it. I think David Pierce made a specific post about it a few weeks ago, saying that it was quite clear based on the wording used in his passing off application and in the injunction that was issued against him. If you compare the two, it seems like, again, there's legalese, it's kind of hard to interpret.
Okay, well, I see Mr. Pierce is in the audience, so if he wants to come up, Casey, feel free to bring him up. We'd love to hear from him. Jack, how you doing, buddy? Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, are you referring to today's hearing? Is that Yeah, today's hearing is a hearing to hear the application of Copa, who filed contempt of court charges against Craig. So a few things come out of that, is one of which is if it's required, they set a hearing date, in which case evidence can be presented. And I think Craig has some evidence, but it's mainly evidence related to his autism, I think. He has a witness that's a more local witness that actually knows him rather than just a general autism witness doctor. And then
it's a psychologist. He said a psychologist who has known him for years, and he'd like to bring more evidence of his disabilities. And they were trying to brush it to the side, saying, "Nah, we don't believe you," which I thought was a little bit insensitive and also not qualified to say that, really.
Yeah, I mean, we already have evidence in the original case that neither Mellor and certainly not the I don't know what they're called, Queen's Counsel, Huff and the other annoying full of himself guy, I forget his name, but those guys railroaded Craig during the unsigned integer question. Craig basically stated, like, if I could write it down, I'll explain it perfectly. And they wouldn't let him write it down. In fact, the sneaky lawyer for Copa quickly then just stated the answer in sort of the coder 101 way of stating it. Craig's way of stating the answer was actually a lot more profound, because Craig was answering the question from the scenario of someone who really understands what uint does, and it provides you more integers, which is why the only reason why anybody would use it if you're going to choose between signed and unsigned integers. But that was all lost because Mellor didn't grant Craig the request to write the answer down. The opposing counsel did the exact opposite. They rushed in with a quick answer to do their best to make Craig look stupid. And all that, including the ruling, Mellor's ruling, just shows that while they paid lip service to, accounting for someone's disability, which they supposedly did, they really didn't. Now, some of that can just be negligence. Obviously, on Mellor's part, it's more likely to just be being negligent of disabilities. But on Copa's part, I think certainly they understood that they were getting a fat pitch over the plate with Craig's, stuttering and nervous, and asked a question that's super easy, so probably loaded in some way in his mind. But anyway, all that's water under the bridge. Really, today was just about Copa's application to file contempt of court, which at least by the end, Mellor had ruled that they'll have a hearing on that on, I think, December 18th. And the big kind of controversy with respect to that, and that's when basically Copa will present their arguments that Craig is in contempt, and Craig will argue that he's not in contempt. And then the rest of it was just arguments based on, well, what happens with the delay of the actual, could there be a delay or a stay in the case itself and the appeal and all that if this contempt stuff is going through? Because obviously it's in Copa's best interest and their client's best interest to delay this stuff as long as possible, because they have a ruling in their favor, which stands as long as they can make it last. So they would have an incentive to delay, and Craig would have an incentive to bring the case forward and have the appeal tried as quick as possible. And by the way, this is all about Copa versus Wright. It has to do with Craig's new filing. I'll just call it the 122 filing, or 144 if you like, because he's basically suing as Craig Wright, not Satoshi, for estoppel against 122 potentially criminal enterprises and potentially criminal developers. There's 22 of those, so combined there's 144 partners that Craig is suing and identified in the estoppel case. And the estoppel case just happens to be what the contempt is all about. So there might be other parts to the contempt, but the main one is Huff and crew and Two Birds and Copa are arguing that Craig violated the ruling of Mellor, saying that he's not allowed to sue as Satoshi. It's pretty clear to me. Obviously I haven't read Copa's skeletal argument, so maybe they have some fun legal trickery in there. But if you understand what Craig's doing, he's really just suing. He's not necessarily suing Satoshi, but he's suing these people known as the Corons, who have kind of taken over the copyright of Bitcoin and are doing things that are against what Satoshi said in public that he was going to do. So this is the whole estoppel thing that I think Gavin described in that. I don't know. I was listening to it as I sleep, as like a sleep aid. So I missed some of what Gavin said, but I think he has it right that estoppel is basically if you're going to build a house and the local legislature has said they're going to drain the swamp so that your house will be on nice land next to you, let's say, so there's no mosquitoes and everything. And then you build a multi-million-dollar community with multiple houses and sell them, and everybody recognizes that the swamp will be gone, next year because the government has already signed and promised all this. Well, if say the government or whoever promised all this doesn't deliver, then you can sue because they've stated publicly they're going to do all this stuff and then they don't do it. And you've built a business or you've invested money or you've spent your time or whatever you've done to based on the statements of others. And so Craig is arguing that as a minor, perhaps in the 2009 through, I don't know, however long he mined until maybe 2015, maybe present. I don't know what his status is, but as a minor, as a builder of businesses, he had, the bank startup that was going to be a Bitcoin bank, in addition to probably like a dozen other things that he was trying to do with his companies before he hooked up with Calvin. And all that is based on his interpretation of Satoshi saying that the protocol will be set in stone, which, everybody recognizes Satoshi said that. But it's not just that. There's a bunch of other promises that Satoshi had made. And that's what his case is based on for this estoppel case. And he's basically suing for, I don't know, the difference between BTC and BSV, essentially. So it's an extremely large sum. And obviously the 144 participants, as strong as they are in terms of finances, would probably struggle to pay it if it was fully ruled against them, plus damages. So it's a rather large suit. And, from my perspective, I think the 122 or the 144 are varying degrees of either ignorant or evil. So, and by evil, I mean they're knowingly cutting corners and committing crimes. And a perfect example is just Coinbase. I mean, they're being investigated by the SEC for basically selling securities without doing the proper security research and security protocol to release securities like a normal bank. And so, and of course, Coinbase is arguing, well, we're a new industry and you didn't regulate us. Well, assets and securities are already regulated, so there really is no need for that. Now, I understand there's arguments over this, but essentially, it's there's a lot of organizations that I think are up to no good, and Craig's kind of suing all of them. There's plenty of exchanges that I think are completely like fraudulent, like making fake volume numbers. The American exchange is probably not, but the international ones, I know BitMEX follows this case. I haven't looked at them in particular, but there's a lot of these international exchanges that are basically operating exchanges outside the U.S. because they know they actually couldn't meet U.S. securities and exchange laws, and mainly exchange laws, because exchange laws don't allow for things like naked shorting and naked longing and using some of these like crazy assets that no one has any real control or knowledge of, such as Tether. I mean, Tether's basically a private Fed, and they don't release any numbers. There's no audits. And so it itself is in danger of shutdown at any point. And all their partners, which is pretty much everybody on this list, who all benefit from Tether and its association with BTC, I think it's, I think Craig has a very serious case against these people, especially if he's Satoshi. But it just so happens that this estoppel case doesn't require him to be Satoshi at all. And in fact, to make sure that he's not violating the not violating the contempt of court, he has to kind of not be Satoshi, which the court has ruled he's not. So Gavin did a great example of saying that this is very similar to the what's it called, the royal what's it called, Gavin, in chess?
Royal fork.
Yeah, Gav, I don't know if you created that example, but it's a really good one, because basically what Craig's saying is well, you can either admit that I'm Satoshi, in which case, maybe this estoppel suit doesn't make sense. I would argue it still does make sense because Satoshi doesn't have control over BTC anymore. So I think he could still try it. But they can't say that you're not Satoshi, but then you're not allowed to sue as Craig at the same time. It doesn't make any logical sense. It's a paradox. And so I would think Copa has to be pretty clever in the way they're presenting their skeletal argument and their what they're going to present at the hearing in December. But the end result of all of it is two things. One, the hearing is scheduled for December 18th, and that will be a very important hearing for two reasons. One, Mellor probably will rule on whether Craig is in contempt of court on that date. And then the second big thing, which they also fought over, was whether Craig has to show up in person. Now, Copa wants him to show up in person, I think, for several reasons. One, Copa, better than anyone, recognizes that Craig's life is in danger. Petey Toad, or whatever his name is, the HBO Satoshi, he's on the run simply, and he's known as Good Satoshi. Like, everybody loves Peter Todd. He's such a friendly, open source guy. Yet he's in hiding, afraid for his life, apparently, because he's been fingered as Satoshi. But somehow nobody needs to worry about Craig, who's bad Satoshi and suing literally everybody in the crypto bro sector. And Craig's not allowed to be afraid for his life, even though his life is worth far more than Peter Todd's. Because if Craig wins any of these cases, those 144 litigants won't even have to lose the estoppel case. They'll be pretty much out of business anyway, just through losing the identity case and then furthermore the copyright case. So the stakes are very large. Craig obviously has many reasons he doesn't want to be there, one of which is he's with his family in Singapore, and it's very inconvenient. It's Christmas time when the thing's being scheduled. So I think he's got a point. I also think Mellor is, I don't really trust him. I think he's vindictive, and he's obviously dines with people that are hardcore zealot, Copa friendly people. And, again, also highly inappropriate. But I think he will probably rule that Craig has to show up in person. And then if he's found in contempt of court, that can come with automatic, criminal consequences. And, Craig might end up behind bars for all I know before Christmas. So I think he's got a lot of points for not being there. But again, that will be decided, I think, in November. There's another hearing to kind of prepare for the case. And my memory doesn't serve what that one's about. But again, I'm reading all this from BitMEX, who actually did a pretty nice job of
There's a directions hearing. I think it's the 26th or 27th of November.
There you go.
And one thing.
Go ahead, Scott. Yeah, you wanted to say something.
It's not just Craig in the passing off case. It is multiple businesses and multiple people and individuals that have also felt the harm of what that massive industry has done by passing off BTC as Bitcoin. So it's not just 144 people versus Craig. It's 144 versus however many people end up signing up into that case. So that if they can define him, he's saying he's Satoshi in this case, then every single business and person who is also saying the same thing and providing the same evidence of what Craig is doing is also saying, well, I'm Satoshi as well then, and that's not possible.
And Scott, Casey, you were talking to Joel. You want to update anybody on that about what's going on with that, people getting involved in the case?
He is definitely working on it. He said it'll be ready soon, but just where everyone can start submitting their witness statements to get in on this entire situation. So he didn't want me to say much about it.
Can we put a link in the nest as well of that, Casey?
The link's not ready yet. That's why he didn't want me to say too much about it yet. So
for the witness statements, wasn't there a place on the MetaNet to submit those, or was that not?
Yeah, I can find that one. The updated one is not ready yet, but I'll find that one and post it.
Thank you.
Nice. So it sounds like okay, Jack, you clarified a lot for me. We're definitely still in the Copa case. So we're in the Copa case, and that's why Meller's on the bench. And Meller is now ruling on whether or not Craig's new case is in contempt of Meller's first ruling or not. And so now, to summarize, basically he's got a end of November hearing to determine whether or not Craig's going to have to appear in person. They're going to have a chance to argue that. And then the December hearing, which will be, it sounds like the 17th or 18th, will be the actual contempt hearing. And then if Craig is found in contempt, that'll mean custody and detainment at the hearing. That will
well, we don't know that, but it could.
It could if he's found in contempt, if he's there. Right. That would be the worst case scenario. Right. So, I mean, that's just what he's facing. Now,
yeah, but the two cases are indeed separate until they're not separate or ruled by judges to have links to each other. So, for instance, what Copa is trying to do is say that if Craig is ruled in contempt for this attempt at suing the estoppel case, then they will argue in the estoppel case that, or at least the partners will be able to argue that to have the whole case dismissed because Craig, violated his court orders. And so they're somewhat related, but Craig's point is, he wants the cases to proceed obviously quickly and not have delays in, say, the estoppel case because of the Copa case. And he certainly doesn't want a delay in his appeal in the Copa case based on the estoppel case. So there's a little bit of legal wrangling there as to what affects what, and that's where it gets to a level of complication that's above my legal pay grade.
Two things that are to be noted there that Riley mentioned earlier were, one, go ahead, Riley. You unmuted. I don't want to interrupt you. At
the beginning of the hearing today, Meller said about Craig's skeleton arguments being very illuminating and basically saying that he's kind of got a back door. If they find him in contempt, then he can just change it. I don't want to speculate, but it kind of sounded as if Meller doesn't think he's going to be in contempt. But then Craig even addressed it himself, and he said, it's never been my intention to be in contempt. And if I am in contempt, then I will just change the claim. I'll change the wording.
Yeah, and there was one, I remember Tufty pointed out, there was one line in the case that looked like it was remaining potentially from the first case because it matched one sentence. And therefore that may require an amendment. And usually in a case like this, you're going to get a one chance to amend, so if there was an error, you can usually you can amend once. And so, yeah, that would make sense, dude, that he can amend if he was held in contempt. Hey, I'll change it. So it sounds like that's what they said, right, Riley?
Yeah, that's what I got from it.
Nice. Dude, Jack, I got to ask you, it sounded like you were down the rabbit hole about this Satoshi, about the promises Satoshi made. And that's where I'm totally, I need, I want some I think a lot of people, I want clarification. Let me just summarize the legal principle that you talked about. I talked about yesterday with this promissory estoppel. Basically, like you mentioned, I kind of described it as like a last will and testament where if grandma makes a will and she says, hey, this is how this estate's going to be handled and Junior's going to get it. If Junior's brother comes in and sues and says, hey, I want to get that now. Well, the court can't go and change what grandma said because she's not around. She can't defend it. They're promissory estopped. They're totally estopped from that, if it's what's called unambiguous. And so the royal fork principle would be where you got the queen being, and the knight and the king are both going after, they put on the chessboard. So the king and basically the knight basically the way I would describe it is like the royal fork would apply where, in this situation, typically the knight is going to attack both opponents, the king and the queen, simultaneously. And it's known as forking the king and basically forking the king and queen. And so it's highly advantageous for the knight's position, because it forces the other side to move their king out of check, or allowing their queen to be captured, right, or lose completely. So the queen here, I guess, this is my opinion, but the queen, I think, would be the naming rights to Bitcoin. So that's what the other side's trying to protect, and that's what Craig's saying has been screwed up, done wrong. And the knight would be CSW as to Satoshi's, he's not Satoshi. He's going to sacrifice himself. That identity of Satoshi is being sacrificed. And so then the queen becomes vulnerable, basically, in this case. So if he's not Satoshi, then therefore they're stopped. The other side would be stopped from saying, that he, okay, as a matter of law, he's not Satoshi. So therefore, if Satoshi made a promise, then the promise must be honored if he made that promise. So that's my question for you, Jack. Did he make a promise about the protocol being set in stone?
100%. Yeah, he basically states in one of his email replies to the early Bitcoin in 2009 or so, maybe it's 2010, one of those early years where he leaves. He says version 0.1 is set in stone, and it's not changed, and that's part of the appeal of Bitcoin. Is grandma has an address or something, or a coin in 2009. Grandma has great-grandchildren through 200 years from now should be able to return those coins in for value without having to learn something new. It's kind of the equivalent of, you don't really change the railroad gauge, right? Like, if you change the railroad gauge even an inch, you might have some brilliant idea as to why that's going to make your tunnels more efficient, or an extra inch of width will let you, ship more oil or chickens or whatever you're shipping. But you don't do that, because the entire railroad industry is built on the gauge that it is. So all the cars, all the engines, all the axles, like there's so much money invested in that gauge remaining the same, that if you change it, you're going to screw people who have invested lots of money. And that's kind of what the estoppel is all about. Craig is saying, hey, Satoshi said in the white paper, small casual transactions. He didn't say eventually we'll have small casual transactions when we get Lightning Network or when we fix our protocol. He released it as is to say that small casual transactions are enabled, and they were enabled. There were actually the default setting when you download the software, as I understand it wasn't around back then, but was 0 fees. So up until probably the late teens, nobody was charging any fees for Bitcoin transactions. The fees came about probably due to the halvenings starting to reduce the amount of coins that the miners could get. And so, and that's the way it's supposed to be. That's why the halvening happens, and that's why the halvening takes the block subsidy to 0, because in the end, you're supposed to rely on the fees. Either that, or who knows? Maybe governments become miners, and you have England, the United States, and China all mining, and they mine for free. I mean, that could be a public works. That's a possibility for miners to take it down to free. But as Satoshi said, miners can come and go. So it could go to all government miners one day, and they're competing governments, and then it could go beyond that, where the governments collapse and are replaced by private individuals again. It could do all kinds of things. And
Crypto Voyager was making the point yesterday that one of the governments, and it was South America, they were investing in BTC because of Max Kaiser. And I think it was Samson Mao told them to buy BTC. And I'm wondering about what your thoughts on that, and also an old guy, I don't know if he's a friend, but probably a guy from way back in the day that's still in the industry. And that's Michael Saylor. He's got a public company, and I don't know if he was around back in your days when you were back on Wall Street, but do you remember him back in the old days, Saylor? Because he seems to be bullish on I guess it's BTC. He's saying Bitcoin, but it's kind of, I think he's buying BTC.
Yeah, he's impossible not to remember, because the day that he pre-reported his quarterly earnings, which I believe were for the March quarter, which the quarter ends on the 31st for most tech companies. And you can pre-report early, like even a month early, to say you're not going to make your previously suggested revenue and income targets. And it just so happens to be that MicroStrategy must have promised way too many revenues and way too many earnings for the first quarter. And then they had to pre-report, because you're supposed to pre-report the first time you know that something's wrong with something else you said. Sort of a very estoppel-y type thing as well, because investors are relying on what you previously said. Our revenue range is going to be, X to X plus Y. And everybody expects that range to be hit somewhere. And if it's not hit, whether above or below, you're supposed to reveal right away. And he did. However, it was a big miss. And it just so happened that I think their stock went down some massive double-digit amount when they pre-announced the miss. And that happened to be on the day either of or after the all-time highs for the NASDAQ. So some people like to say that Saylor's company, MicroStrategy's earnings miss, was the straw that broke the dot-com bubble's back. So it's very ironic that here he is, the world's biggest BTC bull, devoting again putting all his nuts in one basket, so to speak. And then some, because I think he's got debt at this point. I'm not sure. I haven't really looked at his company, but he's making a big bet on BTC. And lo and behold, if BTC went down or had a downdraft for some reason, he would have to once again make a big announcement that they're all levered up into BTC, and it's going to cause a bit of a problem. And if he's forced to sell in like a bankruptcy or so, then you get what's known as a sort of a whirlpool effect where, one guy going down sucks up the rest and they all go down. And I think we saw that already in 2022 with Sam Bankman-Fried, who took down a lot of people around him. And in fact, his takedown was a result of Terra Luna and Celsius and Tornado Cash and all these other guys that got kind of thrown in the slammer or were running from the law and bankruptcy and angry investors. So all this stuff is related. And, I think it's getting even more related. We're having things like, well, the anonymousspeech.com co-founder suddenly disappears when he's doxxed, as also the co-founder of Chainalysis, which happens to be the #1 company in the world, probably the most profitable crypto company, actually. And their #1 job is to help government agencies chase down cyber and crypto bro criminals. Well, isn't that interesting? So this guy, it appears, we don't have actual proof yet that they're the same two people, but when you get doxxed and you disappear within 48 hours of that doxing, and he also is a part of Celsius Network, which went bankrupt in 2022 during that crypto dominoes game. And lo and behold, there's a guy with his pseudonym, Michael Weber, that happens to be the biggest debtor that owes money to Celsius's bankrupt investors. And so that's a court case, and Celsius is suing all of those debtors, and he in particular is the biggest one at something like 55 million. And even worse, he mysteriously disappeared with his 55 million about just days and weeks before the bankruptcy was announced. Isn't it nice to be at the top and get inside information as to what's going to happen so that you can go on the run? So there's all kinds of dirty dealings going on in the space. I don't even know what Trump and RFK are thinking, associating themselves with all this stuff, but they could be lassoing themselves to some of this bad stuff. And I think, I'm not speaking against them. I think the other side has already been whipped by Sam Bankman-Fried, who was, heavily on the Democratic side here in the United States. And that was a huge embarrassment. So I think there's a lot of bad things to come. And it's not lost on me that Satoshi Nakamoto is suing 122 companies and 22 developers that are all associated with this crypto ghetto that we have. And to answer your question, I think the estoppel case is just based on Satoshi's promises. And the two main ones that are easy to identify is small casual transactions, which means low fees and lots of transactions, and you don't change the protocol. And I would point you to, and you should probably remind him, but Stefan always used to tell sort of the origin story of Unisat by saying that, I don't know, prior to 2017, he built a business that was like a Bitcoin vending machine, but not, I don't think to get Bitcoin out. I think to actually use Bitcoin to buy things in a normal vending machine, such as like food items and whatnot. And he was very reliant on small casual transactions and low fees, because when you're dealing with something like a quarter or 50 cents, you simply won't be able to get away with 50 cent BTC transaction fees. And I think in 2017, when everybody was trying to trade crypto furiously, and especially BTC, the fees went way up because they've limited the block size. And his business kind of went kaput. And so he got into Unisat, based on first Bitcoin Cash and then BSV's promise to maintain what Satoshi said. And so I don't know if he's one of the litigants, but I suspect he is. I would not be surprised at all if Stefan's Unisat or pre-Unisat company, he's one of the class action members in the estoppel case. You should probably ask him.
Dude, one of the things you mentioned there about the crypto ghetto, it's funny because we got Riley here. I think he's still here with us. Is he still here? No, he dropped. Okay, he's gone. Anyways,
no, he's there looking us still. I think you can add him up.
Oh, do you mind adding him, Casey? One of the reasons is he has a funny story because he was following Vitalik and Ethereum since 2015. And Vitalik, he said that Craig Wright was a fraud and a scam, and on a little clip. And so then he recaps the great stories. Like, he was following that, and then he was involved in Ethereum for 8 years. And he was following the Reddit forums, which he said that when you go to the Reddit, they just automatically, oh yeah, BSV is a fraud, Craig Wright's a scam. And said that he never looked past that. 8 years went by, he said. And it wasn't until a year ago, and I think it was he found another, a YouTube. He did really well on Ethereum, retired, stopped, he doesn't work anymore. And then he found a YouTube video by Maximus Crypto and started going down the rabbit hole. And then he went and followed the Copa case with Scott's reporting from 369 BSV, and now he's like, fully awake to everything. So he comes straight from it very recently. I mean, it's very unusual to hear that. Normally it's always like, I think the conversation yesterday was, well, people lost money or they went and lost a lot of money buying BSV or something, and they're upset. Well, he's just the opposite, he's retired on Ethereum, but he realized there was a problem. So is that kind of accurate, Scott? I don't see him back up here. So
yeah, from what I said, I guess.
Casey?
I was just going to say I invited Riley. He hasn't come up yet, so maybe he's busy.
Okay. All right. Nice. Yeah. So it sounds like, the Copa, or basically this court case, he's going to be able, it looks like he's probably going to be able to amend even if he's in contempt. So Copa's in there fighting tooth and nail, it looks like, trying to get the contempt.
Why do you think they're so intent on getting him to come to the court if you think that it's easy for him to just get it amended?
Well, Mellor, because he can get detained. He could be held as a flight risk.
Let me point out one important thing about Copa's. I believe it's their. I mean, look, I haven't seen their stuff, but from what I've read, maybe secondhand, one of their biggest contentions is that Craig, in his argument, in his lawsuit filing, mentioned something to the effect of, well, I, also own coins, basically the Satoshi coins or my trust do or something like that. And they're arguing, well, you're stating that you're Satoshi again. But, first of all, you're not allowed to lie in court. And so Craig is appealing the identity case because he's still saying that he's Satoshi. So just because the court says you're not, and it's under appeal, doesn't mean you have to run around stating you're not allowed to state the truth, right? And I think that was actually part of the ruling. Mellor actually made an exception. Copa was trying to completely sew CSW's mouth shut regarding anything regarding Satoshi, and Mellor said, no, you can, on a case such as, we'll make it so that Craig can't file lawsuits if the lawsuit requires that he's Satoshi, that we're going to say no to, but we're not going to stop Craig's free speech from saying I am Satoshi or I have all these things that Satoshi has, because Craig's just telling the truth. So there should be no rulings where someone rules and says you're not allowed to state the truth. And furthermore, the confusion that I think Copa is deliberately handing Mellor and hoping that Mellor again signs off on it is that Craig is saying that he's Satoshi again and using that to sue these 144 entities. But that is not the case. Craig just happens to state the truth along with that he's suing them. But he's suing them as Dr. Craig S. Wright, which by court of law is not Satoshi. So he's allowed to state the truth for himself, but he's not relying on that. He's not relying on people saying, oh, well, you're Satoshi and you're suing the core developers. That is not the estoppel case. The estoppel case is Craig S. Wright, deemed by the court to not be Satoshi, is independently suing the core developers and 144 others because they didn't abide by what the issuer and founder of Satoshi of Bitcoin promised. And it's just as simple as that. So if, in my opinion, if Mellor rules against, if Mellor rules in contempt, I think he's in contempt. I think he's going to be found in contempt eventually, because I don't see any way, based on what Copa's arguing, which is really circular bad logic, and they're just again hoping that Mellor signs off on it and isn't thinking about it, which is what I think he did in the first case. Again, his name's going to be mud again. If he keeps ruling the wrong way, he's free to do that, of course. But history is very clear on how they treat people that make big obvious mistakes when they have all the evidence spread out in front of them, and they're not kind. And that's not to say that is obviously not any kind of threat to Mellor. It's just a stating of historical precedents that should really just encourage him to do the research and actually dig in and not do what Madden Forensics does, which is just sign off on whatever Copa wants.
Somehow in this Copa case, the well-settled law wasn't brought up about Kleiman and Wright. And I know it has nothing to do with Satoshi's identity, so don't confuse the two. But it's already been well determined that the Bitcoin fortune, that of the origins of the cryptocurrency Bitcoin is under the Craig Wright or the Craig Wright businesses or trusts control. That's well settled.
Well, not only that, but what's also well settled, but somehow not acknowledged by Mellor in his ruling, nor Copa, obviously, but Copa's just doing it because they're being deliberately obtuse, is a lot of the evidence that Craig handed in for the Copa case is simply just the evidence from the Kleiman case. I mean, that you have to do that. You're not allowed to just not submit evidence. Whether it's good for you or bad for you doesn't matter. If you have an email that basically says that you killed the king and you don't release that in court, well, now you're not only going to probably lose the you killed the king case, but you're going to be in contempt and you're going to get a whole heap of other things thrown at you on top of it because you're trying to conceal the truth when you are brought to trial. So this is very key in this case because Craig submitted things that were known forgeries that were admitted as forgeries and that he admitted were forgeries because they were done by actors that got control of his files at his previous company back when he was dealing with Ira Kleiman. And you're allowed to submit those. And even if those files were not in favor of Satoshi, or AKA Craig, you still have to file them. But what Copa does is they then say, well, look, CSW, look at him. He files all these fake forgeries and then tries to pass them off as real. But that's actually a complete lie. Craig never said that those files were authentic. He has said things like, well, they're based on authentic files that used to exist, but they've been doctored to say things like Bitcoin and you know, as part of the doxing stuff that someone did back in 2014 and 15. And, you know, to Craig, it's important to get those forgeries into the court cases in his favor, because if anything slips during trial, if Copa makes a mistake or Greg Maxwell testifies, which he seems unwilling to do because he's probably scared he's going to slip up. But if they slip up and they're caught lying or making stuff up that makes themselves look better, now the court's going to go the other way, and it's going to be certain members of CORE who are under duress for having forged documents. And so it's all Craig ever says is, yeah, there's some forged documents in this case, but the key is we don't know precisely who forged them. You're saying it's me, but just because a document's forged doesn't, you have no proof that I did it. And in fact, I think there's a mounting proof that someone else did it. And that's all he's saying. But the problem is Copa runs around saying, well, Craig willingly submits forged documents, even when Copa knows that that's not the case, that those documents were simply part of another court case and Craig just submitted them. So I think it's very duplicitous and two-faced. And you could say that maybe the Copa lawyers just made a mistake, but it's a mistake that's continuing on through Mellor's ruling. And you can see it in Mellor's ruling. So if it is a mistake, now Mellor's making the mistake. And if it is deliberate, well, now it's a deliberate mistake that now Mellor is treating as fact. And I think these things are super important. And that's part of what the 1,000-page appeal skeletal argument has in it. It basically just says, well, you just keep ruling one way without actually assessing all of the different ways that it's also impossible for all these things to happen in all these various areas all at once without there being foul play.
Right. Yeah, good point. So any comments, questions, or if anybody wants to jump up, go ahead. Now would be a good time. If there's anything else to add to the space here, Scott, Riley's back. Yeah, Riley.
Hey, what kind of money would it cost Craig to sue all them entities?
Well, you mean
the filing was like 5,000 to 10,000, and then obviously he's representing himself.
You mean this current suit?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. You know, it's hard to measure whether or not he's paying legal consultants, whether or not he has a legal team behind him that he's retaining. We don't know. It's hard to say. You know, it's probably without having a representative in front of him, there's no way to know. Yeah.
What did he have to pay in the identity trial? Was that over $1 million?
I think it was more like 6 million.
6 million.
I thought there was a few different. I'm pretty sure it came up into totals a lot more. 6 million was just Birds and Birds. Then there was the BTC Dev Corps. They had fees. There was also fees from Kraken in the after case where they was asking for like 1.2. A few people were asking for that amount. I believe in total it was like 12 to 15.
I mean, I know it doesn't prove anything, but what kind of person can afford that?
Well, that Copa would say that that's Calvin paying all those fees. That's what they believe. That's what they would say.
Okay.
Well, they might believe that, but it was stated in court that that's not the case. And personally, it is not the case. Craig is paying for the court cases himself.
Yeah.
And they tried to get a lot of that information out of him by doing those freezing orders, and Craig immediately paid it. So they couldn't pocket watch as much as they wished to.
Yeah, it seems like a 6 million. He just dropped. Man, I mean, now go ahead.
The Barclays account, I believe, had 1.4 million that was put into it. It was a bank guarantee by Barclays that money was there before the court even started. So there was that.
Wow. Anybody have their hand up, Casey, or anybody, any comments or questions that we want to address?
Just because I was listening to it on your last podcast or space, or whatever this is, you guys were talking about the Genesis block. To clarify, the Genesis reward coins of 50 Bitcoin that were placed as an anchor, as Gavin said, to Bitcoin and are not supposed to be moved. Those 50 are not spendable based on the code. I mean, I guess the core could change that if they wanted to, but and again, it probably would screw a few things up because it's the anchor for the entire blockchain. But the reason they're not spendable is only because they're not listed in the UTXO set. So what Bitcoin is literally just miners maintaining a giant number of coins that are circled almost, and that's the live UTXO set. Everything else they're allowed to delete per now I'm forgetting my sections in the white paper, but basically the to save disk space section of the white paper. So you don't have to save the previous transactions that go into the current Coinbase. Sorry, that's a bad word. Into the current UTXO set, which is the list of all the active coins that are able to be spent and spent again. And so that's why the 50 are not able to move. It's via code, and it's hard coded into Bitcoin from the get-go. And then to further clarify, people have sent that address money. So the address you can see on any coin block explorer, and you can send money to it, and the chains will record that. And that money can be spent. I think someone on the call kind of indicated that. It wasn't super clear, but any address that's a Bitcoin address, you can accept money and send money from if you have the proper software. And that gets really interesting because in January, some anonymous entity sent over $1 million right before the Copa case. And that's very interesting for many reasons, one of which, the reason it's interesting is because a major part of Craig's court case is, well, if Satoshi were alive, isn't it strange that he never comes out and says anything against me? So therefore he must kind of like me, or he is me, right? So, and that is the case. If those coins move, for instance, even if nobody knows who put them in there, but if they come out of there, the only way they're coming out of there is if Satoshi himself or someone associated with Satoshi or a criminal who somehow stole Satoshi's stuff moved it out of there. But what it does tell the not your keys, not your coin crowd is that sort of looks like Satoshi's alive, doesn't it? And if he's alive, why hasn't he come out and said anything? And that has interesting implications in current news because we have HBO and we have this knuckleheaded Steve Toshi guy all coming out saying they're Satoshi. And isn't that a convenient timing? Because what Copa can argue is, well, look at all these Satoshis that could be around. And look at Peter Todd, who's now in hiding because he's afraid for his life, even though he's considered like good Satoshi. So I don't know why he's afraid for his life. Everybody loves him, especially all the litigants that Craig is suing. They probably love him too. but he's supposedly afraid for his life. And so what could be happening is this is just another marketing setup to kind of expose to the courts, saying, well, look, Craig can say that Satoshi would come forward, but Petey Toad isn't coming forward. He's running and hiding. And so there's a reason why, even if Satoshi's alive, that he wouldn't come forward. So it's very much a chess match. One could picture a entity friendly to Craig throwing money into the Genesis block, fully knowing that Satoshi or Craig could move it out. And wouldn't it be amazing if, like, seconds after the ruling goes against Craig in the appeal, the Satoshi Genesis block just moves coins? And the beauty of that would be nobody would have to admit it, right? Craig could basically say, well, I abided by what I said. I'll never publicly sign. And he wouldn't. It would just be some anonymous Satoshi-like or Satoshi-associated character moving those coins out for $1 million. It's a significant amount, right? And it would also kind of indicate that, well, according to many, Satoshi might be alive. So it would be a bit much for both the court and the public to take that the Satoshi coins, the Genesis block, are moving right after a ruling goes against them. It would be a very ironic exclamation point, and no one would have to really own up to it, because it's a private network, and who knows what people do unless they're sued or brought up on charges. There's no reason to pursue that, but it would be a very nice exclamation point. But on the other side of the chessboard is Copa fully recognizing that could happen, and saying, well, why don't we set up this movie that identifies one of our friends here? He'll just run around and hide and act like, oh, it's awful to be Satoshi, even though him and Adam Back are like beaming at each other, like wishing they were Satoshi. But in other words, it's like a false flag almost. Now, do I know that to be true? No. But I'm just saying it would be a strategy, wouldn't it? And I also don't know who put the $1 million into the Genesis address, but that would be a clever play. And so, things get interesting and things get kind of dirty real quick when we consider what could be possible.
Right. And one of the things Scott had thought about it strategy wise was how BlackRock is strategizing here about potentially increasing the coin supply in BTC. Did you want to mention that theory, Scott?
No, I just said about Peter Todd. A lot of people were thinking it was going to be less, but they picked Peter Todd, and he's obviously the biggest proponent for raising the coin base of 21 million. And that's really the only thing that I can see that it would destroy a lot of people's belief in BTC raising the coin, but it would also allow them to sort of continue. They could control that scarcity the same way they control fiat.
Yeah, what better way to make fiat last longer than to turn BTC into the most fiat thing ever?
Right. It makes a lot of sense, though. I mean, add more inflation to it, and then you got this guy who might be Satoshi. Well, he said that he might be Satoshi. He supports it. Oh, there you go. I'm still wondering about the Sailor, though. If he disclosed this lawsuit in his filing recently, it looks like he didn't. Instead, he doubled down and he told the investors he's going to buy another $42 billion in BTC. Looks like that's what happened. Do you think he had a duty to disclose that stuff, Jack, to his investors about this lawsuit?
No doubt you have to disclose it, but I think there's probably some allowance to be had for waiting for the case to be accepted and other things. So I don't know all the legal wranglings of what you have to do, but you do have to disclose any risk factors. And if you don't, and those risk factors hit you in the ass later, well, now you're really screwed. Now CEOs can be criminally charged because they knew that it was there, and that's why Craig's making it very public, right? He's not trying to be a dick. He's not trying to thumb his nose at people. He's just saying very loudly, hey, I want everybody to realize that these guys have been put on notice. They're not unaware. I'm making it very loud and making it very aware as a public service. And if they decide to flick their noses at that, well, then shame on them. And the only motivation to not disclose it would just be they don't want to admit that it's a risk factor, which is the whole reason risk factors are there. And that's why CEOs and CFOs have to sign the documents when they're submitted.
Yep. All right. Nice. Okay. So I say we move to close this down. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 up on the stage. So Miss Casey Nicole, you're first to my left. And closing thoughts.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, John, Jack, for coming in and sharing all this of your insights with us. It's always a pleasure to listen to you. So, Gavin, again, thanks for hosting this space too. And still have a great weekend.
Miss Casey Nicole, thank you. Riley Cyrus, closing thoughts from you, my man.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the hearing earlier on today. It was said that Craig's got another 21 days to produce any further evidence with regards to the contempt application. And counsel were asking that it be limited to 40 pages. And basically Mellor said, I don't think so. So he didn't really give an upper limit for how many pages there were. But it was my understanding that if he does produce this evidence and this evidence is sufficient, I don't think there will be a hearing.
Sounds like no hearing potentially if the evidence is sufficient. Well, all right.
I could be wrong, but that's the way I'm remembering it, because he did mention something about he needs to go through Craig's skeleton argument because it was very illuminating. So yet, like, I don't know. I don't want to speculate or anything, but it kind of felt as if Mellor doesn't think he is in contempt.
All right, nice. Okay, Scott, 31693SB, closing thoughts.
Just want to say thank you to everyone who's joined the space. Big thank you to Riley for going to the court and getting the eyewitness reviews of what's going on. Thank you to John and Casey. And yeah, let's see what happens. If anybody finds any information out about court cases or sees anything, always send it to me and I'll be happy to go down there. Well, now we've got Riley, who's just down the road from the court cases. This is we can have someone there going all the time when they're free, So yeah, good job, everyone.
Definitely. All right, Riley, did you want to say something before I'm going to go to Jack in closing? Okay, we're good. All right, yeah, Jack Pitts in closing thoughts.
Well, like any late night talk show guest, I just wanted to do a plug. My plug is a plug and an anti-plug. Someone mentioned on your last thing that I listened to last night about HTX. And if I'm not familiar, I believe HTX is the former Huobi, if I'm saying that right.
That was Riley. Riley, what was that?
Yeah, I mentioned I've been buying on HTX since October last year.
What are the initials? HTX,
Huobi.
Huobi. Okay, yeah, I heard about them.
Yeah, no, yeah. Look, you got to do what you got to do in this world. We're all in different geographies, and not everything's available. But what I would say is this: if you can, Orange Gateway, and I have no financial interest in Orange Gateway. I only have a tertiary interest in fair markets. And listen, I'm not able to speak 100% for Orange Gateway. I've gone back and forth with Thor a couple times. He seems like a great guy with a great vision. And he's got all the experience in the world of running a exchange and exchange software. So I'm currently experimenting with Orange Gateway. Everything's going great so far. He's making changes where there's small little speed bumps. And, he's starting from scratch, and it's hard to start from scratch. So first of all, based on the fact that he's one of the few BSV projects that I really, really like, I would just ask and plead with you that if you can, try them out, use them. The sign-up process isn't super hard. I think you do have to give, these days you have to do it for everybody, but you have to give a form of ID and maybe like a letter that says where you live or something. And all that goes pretty smoothly. And as for HTX, what I can say is it appears as though Justin Sun pretty much owns it or has control of it. I don't trust him whatsoever. He's very much in leagues with CZ and Binance and Tether, it appears. And also, I think HTX and OKX and some of these other guys, BitMEX, they have fake volumes. I don't see any way that that's not true. I would love for them to show an audit of who AML and KYC wise is making these trades. The BTC numbers make no sense. The BSV numbers certainly make no sense. There's certainly not $27 million worth of BSV trading every day. That's laughable. And why would they do this? I don't expect people to understand it. It would probably take a semester-long course to explain how markets work. But there is a way to cheat the markets by flooding orders in, fake orders, and wash trading, and spoof orders. And in my opinion, that's what's going on at Binance. That's what's going on at HTX. And the only way to stop it is to stop using them and trade on exchanges that you think are worthy, and starve them to death. And that's my plug, is try Orange Gateway. And if you can avoid it, avoid all the VPN exchanges. There's a reason why they're not in the US, and it has nothing to do with, anarchist principles and all that stuff. It just has to do with whether you're an anarchist or not an anarchist. If you don't believe in fairness in a game or exercise like an exchange, well, then what's the point? Because if I can just make BSV's price be whatever I want it to be because I'm CZ and I can overrun everybody with, extra tethers or whatever, then what's the point of having a business based on Bitcoin BSV or even speculating in it? There would be no point. There's a chapter in a great gambling book on horse racing and also blackjack that it's like chapter 6 of one of the most famous horse racing Bibles. And it basically says, if you're involved in a game where the dealer can deal from the bottom of the deck, what's your probability of winning against the house based on all these other rules? And the answer is 0. It doesn't matter what the rules are. If you can double down on 10 or 11, or if you can split aces, none of those things matter. If the dealer's dealing from the bottom of the deck, you're going to lose. And you don't have to be any kind of political side to understand that. Your job as a steward of an exchange is to make sure that the participants can actually conduct markets. And there's a long history in the commodities markets, and going way before Bitcoin. We're talking sheep and sugar and cattle and a whole bunch of commodities that don't even trade anymore. And all of those rules and rule changes and common law and all of that stuff has to do with fair markets and all the different ways that bad actors have found to manipulate the markets in their favor. And so these exchanges, there's a reason why CZ went to jail. He was deemed to purposefully not abide by the rules of a fair exchange. And I think they're not catching the biggest crime that these exchanges are doing. Maybe the court monitor will help in that respect. I tend to doubt it. I think we'll see this crypto crash happen, and that will force the issue. Usually when the peasants complain with their pitchforks and torches is when regulators come in. They don't come in beforehand because then they're at risk of pissing everybody off. And I think this is no different. So the only way you can fight it until there's a crash in some of these crime coins is you just have to choose good people. And, it's sort of like that Ayn Rand Gulch concept. Just go to the Gulch and find your people. And, so far so good on Orange Gateway. He seems to be one of the good guys. So try and give him a chance.
Thank you, Jack. Closing thoughts. We did have a talk with Vinny Langham yesterday, and he did mention that even on these exchanges, some of the bucket shops that are out there, he said that they're doing a 60-time confirmation to withdraw BSV, even the ones that even have it, 60 times. So he said he started complaining about it yesterday, and I let Alex and some of the others know. So hopefully that is going to be talked about, and if we find out who's doing that, and clearly that's a big no-no, 60 confirmations to withdraw from the exchange. So, yeah, hopefully that gets changed. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. Miss Casey Nicole and Scott coming up on stage. Riley Cyrus, thanks for all the listeners. I'll get this out on YouTube when it's done, and we got a recording here. So be sure to retweet it, share it, like it, and leave a comment here in the little nest. All right, y'all. See you at the top. I'm going to end it there.